You demonic f***ing scum. Fuck you, motherfucker. You deserve to feel the little licks of the flames of hell.
There are moments when people who built their entire careers claiming to be truth tellers suddenly show the world who they really are. And what Ben Shapiro and Dan Bongino are doing right now, after Candace Owens asked public questions about the death of her friend Charlie Kirk, is one of those moments that has people staring in disbelief. The reaction has been loud, messy, and very revealing. What we are watching is one of the most awkward public blow-ups from two conservative voices who usually present themselves as calm, serious commentators. Suddenly, the tone changed, and the attacks started flying everywhere. Let's slow down and look at what actually started all of this. Candace Owens launched a documentary series looking into the circumstances surrounding Charlie Kirk's death and how Erica Kirk acted afterward. She didn't just throw random claims around either. She laid out timelines, pointed at specific details, and asked the public to examine pieces of information she believes do not line up.
Learned what's in that Talmud, and I encourage other people at home to learn what is in that Talmud so that you know what Ben thinks of you, because he doesn't just hate me, he hates you too, white men. He hates all black.
That is what journalists do. That is what investigators do. And that is what people often do when someone close to them dies and the story still feels incomplete. But instead of responding calmly, Ben Shapiro and Dan Bongino, two commentators who spent years branding themselves as fearless voices willing to challenge the system, came out swinging and started attacking her publicly in a very aggressive way. The language that followed was so intense and strangely synchronized that many people immediately started asking a serious question. Was this coordinated behind the scenes? The tone from both commentators sounded almost identical, and it escalated fast. Dan Bongino jumped onto his podcast and went straight for extreme accusations. Instead of calmly addressing the points Candace Owens raised, he called her demonic and even said harsh things, wishing serious consequences on her. There was no breakdown of her evidence, no discussion of the timeline she presented, and no attempt to counter her claims with documents or facts. It was all name-calling and outrage. Then Ben Shapiro stepped in with what many listeners described as a furious rant. He labeled Candace as evil and twisted, while trying to frame Erica Kirk and Turning Point USA as the real victims in the situation. He also accused Candace of trying to profit from Charlie's death, which only poured more heat into the already explosive debate. But here is the detail many viewers noticed immediately. Just like Bongino, Shapiro did not directly address a single piece of the evidence she presented. Not the timeline, not the specific claims, not the questions she raised. And that tells people something important. When someone believes the facts are clearly on their side, they usually respond with facts. They break down the argument piece by piece. But when the response turns into insults, dramatic accusations, and spiritual attacks instead of evidence, people start wondering what exactly they do not want the public examining too closely. And before diving deeper into what Shapiro and Bongino actually said next, there is a huge layer of hypocrisy sitting right at the center of this entire reaction.
You're obnoxious, you have absolutely no values that exist outside of the Talmud. You describe yourself as a Talmudic Jew, and I've learned what's in that Talmud, and I encourage other people at home to learn what is in that Talmud so that you know what Ben thinks of you, because he doesn't just hate me, he hates you too, white men. He hates all black people, okay? If he's following the rules of the Talmud, I mean, when I say hates, they think that we're animals, that they have a right to own us, that they have a right to make us worship them, that they have a right to treat Charlie the way that he treated Charlie while he was alive, only to then try to defraud the population into thinking that he is somehow a part of his legacy.
The hypocrisy here is so obvious that it needs to be said clearly and without dancing around it. Ben Shapiro built his entire public image on the idea that he is a fearless truth teller. For years, he attracted millions of followers by presenting himself as the guy who follows logic and evidence wherever they lead, no matter who gets uncomfortable with the result. His famous line says it all: "Facts do not care about your feelings." That slogan practically became the backbone of his brand. His whole platform was built on the belief that asking difficult questions, challenging official stories, and demanding proof is not only acceptable, it is necessary. Dan Bongino built a very similar reputation. He branded himself as the man who would expose hidden information and shine light on things powerful people would rather keep quiet. Before stepping into his current government role, he was one of the loudest voices in conservative media, pushing for full transparency around the Epstein files. He told his audience again and again that if he ever gained access to those documents, everything would come out immediately. Day one releases, he said. Total transparency. No more secrets being kept from the American public. That promise helped build enormous trust with his audience. It helped grow massive platforms and brought both of these men serious influence and wealth. And now, Candace Owens, someone who was personally close to Charlie Kirk, someone who says she has text messages directly from Charlie himself, is stepping forward with specific evidence and direct questions about what happened. And that is the twist that has many people raising their eyebrows. Candace Owens is doing the exact thing Ben Shapiro and Dan Bongino always claimed they stood for: asking questions, looking at evidence, and challenging a story that feels incomplete. Yet their response was not calm debate or detailed rebuttals. It was to label her demonic and launch public attacks. The hypocrisy is not hidden. You do not need to dig through old clips or study complicated details to see it. Anyone who has watched these commentators for even a short time can spot the contradiction immediately. Because this does not look like a defense of truth. It looks like a defense of something else entirely. And the louder the coordinated attacks on Candace become, the more people start wondering what exactly they are trying to protect. Now here is the part that Ben Shapiro likely wishes people would stop focusing on. While he has been presenting himself as a defender of Charlie Kirk's legacy and using Charlie's death to criticize Candace and shut down questions, Candace released something that changed the entire conversation. She shared text messages that she says came directly from Charlie Kirk himself. And according to what she showed, the things Charlie allegedly said about Ben Shapiro were very different from the image Shapiro has been presenting since Charlie's death. In those messages, Charlie reportedly told Candace that he did not trust Shapiro and did not have a positive opinion of him. Candace also claims Charlie warned her that Shapiro might eventually try to damage both of their careers. In the messages she described, Charlie allegedly advised her to treat Ben like noise, meaning ignore him, avoid reacting, and do not give him the attention he might be looking for. The messages go even further, with Charlie reportedly saying that Shapiro's respect among people actively working in the movement was actually quite low. That claim alone has people paying very close attention to this entire situation. According to the messages Candace described, Charlie Kirk was not talking about Ben Shapiro like a respected teammate or trusted ally. The tone was completely different. Instead of praise, Charlie allegedly described Shapiro as someone who's standing among the people actually doing the real work in the movement was very low. That alone already paints a picture far different from the public image many people have been hearing. But the messages did not stop there. One line Candace revealed from Charlie read, "The Ben thing involves me more than he wants to admit. He knows Jon Snow is stronger than the dragons that fly higher." If you know Game of Thrones, you understand exactly what that kind of reference suggests. It points to the idea that someone who appears smaller or less powerful might actually be stronger than the flashy figures sitting at the top. And it hints that the people in power know this and feel threatened by it. Candace said the conversation continued with both of them agreeing that Shapiro viewed Charlie as a real threat to his influence and position. That is when Charlie reportedly used another Game of Thrones comparison to describe what he believed was happening behind the scenes. He is sending his incestuous brother to go try and kill us. Anyone familiar with the show knows that line is not describing friendly competition or normal disagreement. It paints the picture of someone sending others to take out rivals they see as dangerous competitors. And then came the message that many viewers say might be the most shocking of all. After Candace suggested that Shapiro seemed bothered by how close she and Charlie were, Charlie allegedly responded with something even more blunt. He wrote, "It is worse. He views you as my slave. 100% control her is what he was really saying to me when he called." Think about that for a moment. According to Candace, the same Charlie Kirk that Ben Shapiro now publicly presents himself as defending and honoring had privately told her that Shapiro believed Charlie should have complete control over her. That claim alone has added another explosive layer to this already intense situation. According to what Candace described from those messages, Charlie believed Ben Shapiro had been putting pressure behind the scenes regarding Charlie and Candace's relationship and the independence Candace represented. That detail alone adds another layer to the story many people are now looking at much more closely.
Epstein was not some sort of whiz kid hedge fund manager. Epstein was playing a part. It's nothing new that if you're in the intel agencies, you want to try and get as much blackmail on powerful people as possible. The evidence that shows that Epstein was a creation of either Mossad, Israeli intelligence, American intelligence.
So let's look carefully at what is happening now. Ben Shapiro has stepped forward, presenting himself as the defender of Charlie Kirk's legacy. He has used that position to strongly criticize Candace Owens and frame her questions as harmful. But here is the uncomfortable contrast people keep pointing out. The same Charlie Kirk that Shapiro says he is protecting is the man Candace claims privately expressed deep distrust toward him. According to her, Charlie even warned her about what he believes Shapiro might try to do in the future. That is why some observers say this situation feels less like loyalty and more like the exact scenario Charlie allegedly predicted. Instead of calm discussion about the evidence Candace presented, the focus turned into personal attacks and attempts to shut the conversation down. And there is another detail in this story that keeps grabbing attention and raising eyebrows. Charlie Kirk's final major recorded interview was with Ben Shapiro, and it reportedly happened about 48 hours before Charlie passed away. On its own, that timing could simply be coincidence. People often do interviews shortly before unexpected events happen. That is just how real-life timelines sometimes unfold. But because of everything else surrounding this story, that timing has become a detail many people keep examining very carefully. But when people place that timing next to everything else being talked about, the story starts to feel heavier. The messages Candace says she has shared about Charlie's distrust of Ben Shapiro, the questions about what Charlie knew, and the people he had reportedly been speaking with during his final days all add more layers to the conversation. There were also reports of a Zoom call involving Josh Hammer and a rabbi, along with a message Charlie allegedly sent to his security chief saying, "They are going to kill me." When people hear details like that, and then learn that Charlie's final major interview happened with someone he had privately described as a threat, the timing suddenly feels far more intense to many observers. That is why people keep bringing it up again and again. The more aggressively those questions are pushed away, the louder the curiosity seems to grow. Trying to silence questions rarely makes them disappear. It usually makes the public want answers even more. And while some critics say Ben Shapiro's reaction looks inconsistent with the image he built, Dan Bongino's situation is being described by some commentators as something even more dramatic. Because what Bongino has done, according to critics watching this unfold, looks like one of the sharpest public reversals in modern political media. And the timeline of that shift is not hidden. It is fully documented in his own past broadcasts. Before stepping into his role connected to federal law enforcement leadership, Dan Bongino hosted one of the biggest podcasts in conservative media. And one topic he returned to again and again, almost like a promise to his audience, was the Epstein files. For years, the message from Dan Bongino was crystal clear: full transparency on the Epstein files. No redactions, no secrets, no holding anything back from the public. He repeated that position again and again on his podcast, and he did not say it quietly either. He said it with force and confidence, making it one of the biggest pillars of his entire brand. His message to listeners sounded bold and simple. He was the guy who would not back down, the guy who could not be pressured, bought, or silenced. And if he ever gained access to those files, the public would finally see everything. That promise was heard by millions of people. Millions believed him, followed him, and helped grow his platform because they trusted that commitment to transparency. Then everything changed when Bongino stepped into a powerful federal role. On March 17, 2025, he officially began his position as FBI Deputy Director. That was supposed to be the moment when the man who demanded answers finally had access to the information he had been talking about for years. But according to internal emails later reported by Bloomberg, something surprising happened almost immediately. By March 18th, literally his second day on the job, Bongino was already receiving internal guidance about the Epstein files. Not guidance about releasing them to the public, guidance about how to redact them. Instructions about what information should be hidden and what the public would or would not be allowed to see. And since that moment, critics say something even more noticeable has happened. The same Dan Bongino, who once spoke about Epstein transparency nonstop, has gone completely quiet about the topic. No big updates for his audience, no push for the day one release he once promised, and no detailed explanation about what he discovered inside those files. So when people step back and look at the timeline, the contrast stands out sharply. Bongino spent years building trust by promising total transparency about Epstein. Then he gained a position that finally gave him access to those files. And within roughly 24 hours, he was already being briefed on how parts of that information would be kept from public view. And that is the moment where many observers say the story takes a sharp turn. Because the same voice that spent years demanding total transparency suddenly became very quiet once real access to the information arrived. That shift is what people keep pointing to when they question the gap between the promises that were made and what actually followed afterward. For years, the message sounded simple and powerful. The public deserves the truth. Powerful people should not be protected. Hidden files should be opened so everyone can see what is really inside. Those statements helped build trust with millions of listeners who believed that message meant something. But when someone moves from the outside, where it is easy to demand answers, to the inside, where the actual documents exist, the expectations change quickly. Suddenly, the audience that supported those promises starts watching closely to see if the same energy is still there. And right now, critics say that energy looks very different. Instead of constant pressure for full disclosure, the topic has largely disappeared from the conversation. That silence is exactly what many listeners did not expect after hearing years of confident promises. So now two separate controversies are colliding at the same time. On one side, Candace Owens is raising questions about Charlie Kirk and facing fierce backlash. On the other side, people are asking why a longtime transparency advocate has stopped talking about the very files he once promised to expose. And that is why this entire situation keeps growing instead of fading away. The more people compare past statements with what is happening now, the more the contradictions start standing out. Viewers remember the speeches, the podcasts, the bold promises about truth and transparency. When those promises collide with silence or aggressive pushback, it naturally raises eyebrows. For Ben Shapiro, the criticism centers on the way he reacted to Candace Owens raising questions. Instead of calmly addressing the specific claims, critics say the response turned into personal attacks and emotional language. For someone whose brand has always been built around logic and evidence, that kind of reaction surprised a lot of people. Watching from the outside, for Dan Bongino, the scrutiny focuses on something slightly different. People are looking directly at the timeline of his promises about the Epstein files and comparing it with what happened once he entered a position with real access to those documents. That comparison has become a major talking point across political media. Now, these two storylines are crashing together in a very public way. Questions about Charlie Kirk's final days, the messages Candace Owens says she revealed, and the sudden silence around the Epstein files are all being discussed at the same time. And the more critics try to shut the conversation down with insults or outrage, the more the public seems determined to keep digging and asking even louder questions. And that is where the story stands right now. What started as Candace Owens asking questions about the death of someone she personally knew has exploded into a much bigger controversy involving major voices in conservative media. Instead of a calm discussion about evidence, the situation turned into public attacks, heated accusations, and a debate that is getting louder by the day. Supporters on all sides are arguing about what the facts really show, while critics are comparing old promises about truth and transparency with the reactions we are seeing today. The text messages Candace says she revealed, the timeline surrounding Charlie Kirk's final days, and the questions about the Epstein files have all collided into one massive public conversation. And here is the reality. People are not going to stop asking questions anytime soon. When powerful figures clash publicly and serious claims start circulating, curiosity only grows. The public keeps watching, listening, and trying to figure out which parts of the story truly hold up under scrutiny. Now, I want to hear from you. What do you think about everything that has come out so far? Do these reactions make sense to you, or do they raise even more questions? Drop your thoughts down in the comments below. And if you found this breakdown helpful, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with others so more people can join the conversation.